Okay, thanks very much for having me, everybody. My name is Sîan Thomas. I'm Head of Systems at the National Library of Wales. And I'm here to tell you about our migration story. It certainly feels like a saga, and you'll see why. So here we go. Gratuitous photo of our building in Aberystwyth on a lovely sunny day. If you were the opposite side of that photo that's kind of missing, we face the Cardigan Bay, so we're facing the sea. It's a really beautiful location. We have the one site. We are based in Aberystwyth, West Wales, and we can be a little bit difficult to get to for people in Wales. It's a very long train ride or a very long drive for most people. So we've been invested since quite early on in making material available online to kind of counteract that. So a little bit more background about us. We were founded by Royal Charter in 1907. We are a legal deposit library, one of 6 in the UK, which means that we are entitled to receive a copy of every book that is published in the UK. We don't actually take all of those books, although we do take a lot of them. And our kind of main focus is on the culture and history and language, I should have mentioned as well, of Wales and the Celtic nations. We are home to a very broad range of collections, including rare books and manuscripts, archives, maps, artworks, photographs, film and video, sound material. I could go on forever. We've got a collection of bardic chairs from my Eisteddfods from across Wales. So we have a very broad collection remit in terms of the type of materials we collect. We are not the official sort of gallery or archive for Wales, but we do have extensive collections in those areas. And as I mentioned, because of our location, we've been actively digitizing collections to make them more easily available to our customers, the people of Wales, since the very late 90s, possibly maybe even 2000 onwards. So a bit of background about Fedora at NLW. So back in 2005, we were, as is periodically the need for libraries, we needed to procure a new library management system. And it was decided to bundle in, as we now had about 5 years worth of digital content that we were sharing online. It was decided that it was time to actually go out for a digital asset management solution, following the OAIS model, as many of us still are. So that was a kind of joint procurement, and we wanted the two things in one go from one supplier because we wanted them to be as integrated as possible. We've always tried to target as seamless as possible an experience for the user so that they don't really feel like they've got to go to a separate interface to find our digital collections. We see them as an extension of the physical collections that we hold. So the product we ended up with back then was called Vital, which was built on Fedora 2. I didn't actually know it went back that far. Now, we bought a package and it did have a kind of user interface and so forth, but we've never really used it. We've always seen Fedora as something that sits in the back end and manages and preserves, while other products kind of do the work of curation, digital curation, and public access. So the last time we migrated our Fedora was back in 2017. We moved to 3.8.1, and I note that migration took us about 6 months with quite an extensive team of people dedicated to it, a lot more than we have available for our current migration. So we have, as reflects our sort of physical collections, we have many large and differing digital collections, photographs, prints, manuscripts, wills, quite a big collection of newspapers and journals, which were digitised through Welsh Government funded projects and so on. And having added content through projects has brought challenges, as you will see. Currently, we're at around about 6 million Fedora 3 objects, and we're still ingesting, I believe we've ingested some content today. And then we provide access currently via IIIF, either directly to the objects via the Universal Viewer, or we also have the UV and other solutions integrated into our websites and catalogues, which I will show next. So this is an example of one of our wills. So this is Thomas Jones from Llanfairpwll Fawr, which is I can more or less see outside of my window. And this is what our collections look like in the UV. This is kind of our default view. So some materials may have their own websites or may have slightly more bespoke access arrangements. But the idea is that everything that we have digitized is still accessible in the viewer. And that means that if we get to a point where project websites have run their course and we can't really commit to maintain them anymore, then this will always be available. Okay, and this is just an example of one of those project websites. So there's a website called Welsh Newspapers Online. And this is actually not IIIF, it's the only one that isn't. It's but it is delivering images via OpenSeaDragon viewer. And people can search for newspapers by title, by date range, and so forth. And then we've also got on the right hand side, we've got the OCR of the content. So it's just an outline then of our current and indeed future DAMS environment. So we have digitization workflow tools, which create our digitization outputs. We're currently using a product called LIM and a very old product that we actually paid somebody to develop way back in the midst of time called Wombat. We are also in the process of moving to Gooby at the moment, which I'd rather not be doing that at the same time as my Fedora migration, but that's where we are. So the digitization outputs then get sent into our Camel workflows, which we've developed in-house, and they basically prepare the submission information package. It runs JHOVE over the archival, Jove over the archival TIFF, creates our JP2 derivatives, does the OCR if it's the print material and that's relevant. It will pull descriptive metadata from our library management system records, and then creates a METS document, which can often be quite long because it contains everything. It contains that technical metadata, the descriptive metadata, details about benchmarking, arrangements for digitization. It's all in that one document. So that METS then gets sent for ingest with the image files. And then as part of the ingest process, so the access files get sent off to the IIIF access stack, IIIF server. Then the METS document and OCR and data streams sort of linking to the files are sent to Fedora. But the images actually live in our digital archive, which is currently a Black Pearl system. So Fedora doesn't actually actively manage either the archival nor the access derivatives for us. It knows about them, it knows where they live, it can point to them, but it doesn't host them inside. So Fedora for us is a management layer, but it doesn't actually actively preserve the files. So obviously we've been on Fedora 3 for quite a long time now. What were our drivers for change? The main one, we're a sort of public body that is sponsored by Welsh Government. And one of the obligations that they set on us is that we have to comply with cybersecurity standards. We have to comply with Cyber Essentials Plus, which generally means that you shouldn't be running software that is behind or significantly behind the current version, which obviously by now Fedora 3 is. So that's a significant driver for us. Since we started, I think I mentioned we had kind of two DAMS managers. We had a developer and a sort of project manager post specifically for Fedora back in the day. And over time, nearly 20 years now, we've seen, as many of us in the culture sector have, we've seen significant cuts. And we just have less staff to do things with, and a lot of the initial expertise has left those people. We have a number of initial workflows that are currently broken, and we don't have either the expertise or the staffing resource to make sure that they are fixed. And I mentioned the kind of big digitization projects, which have been amazing in terms of getting huge chunks of content available to the public, and they are still available. But as many people may have experienced, when something's project driven, people come in and say, oh, it would be amazing if it did this, and we want this specific little tweak in this, and what you end up is something that's kind of doesn't work in the same way as the rest of the stuff. And there've been so many projects over time that we've got quite a lot of different implementations of the same thing in our repository, which is problematic. We also need to look at implementing new workflows. So in recent years, we've become home to an extremely significant collection of broadcast material. The national broadcasters in Wales, BBC, ITV and S4C, have all deposited their archives with us. We're currently managing that via a separate system, separate media asset management. But the end goal for us is that Fedora manages everything and IIIF delivers everything. So at some point we need a new workflow. And given the other constraints, there was no real point in even looking at developing this new workflow on Fedora 3. And I think I've already mentioned the complexity that has developed over time. So the journey begins. We first started looking at migration back in 2014. I managed to find some track tickets on that. So we looked at Fedora 4, and I think at that time, I wasn't around in systems in that time, but I think it was felt that it was too big a move, that we didn't really feel a lot of pressure to make. And there were other things we wanted to focus on. So we stuck with our Fedora 3. And then by 2019, a lot of the drivers that I've just spoken about started sort of kicking in. So relatively small team of us, kind of head of development, myself, and the digital standards and ingest managers started looking at what we would need to do to migrate to Fedora 5. And then 2020 happened, and I don't think I need to say any more about that. We were kind of, as everybody else in the sector, we were kind of firefighting and just trying to get access to things, dealing with completely new ways of working. So it all went on the back burner, and then we started again back in 2022. I've said started again in earnest, but it kind of didn't work that way because, as I mentioned, there were just a very small kind of team of 4 of us looking at this, and all of us with competing priorities all the time. We found we were making very, very slow progress. And then on top of that, since 2022, we've had even more staffing changes. Since then, we lost our then head of development, who was kind of the last person who had ongoing expertise in our current Fedora. And yeah, so we've kind of had to start from scratch, really. Sort of trying to keep Fedora 3 going, but also look seriously at trying to get ourselves to now Fedora 6. So the approach that we've taken, and this kind of spans the whole period, really, it's not more of a recent thing, but we started by looking at what we have, and we found 53 different data models, which this is the spreadsheet that we've used to track them, and this isn't even, the spreadsheet goes down for 53 plus rows, and there's more columns that I couldn't even fit on the slide without making it totally unreadable. So this kind of tracks each model, which data streams does it have, and lots of information to try and help us identify how we can amalgamate things and make things simpler going forward. So 53 different models. Many of them are very similar. Multiple models pertaining to the same project, for example, but they just, this comes down to the tweaks that people would ask us for. And back when we had the resource, we were kind of blasé about it and went, yeah, fine, you can totally make that work. We did, but the problem is it then needs sustaining. So I think we've learned our lesson on complexity there, and definitely looking to keep it simple and make sure that it's as generic as possible, and meets our core use cases. But we've been clear with stakeholders that there needs to be a general understanding. This is kind of the default. This is the backstop. If you want to develop something that's got all the bells and whistles for a particular material type, by all means have at it, but Fedora needs to be there in the background and needs to be much more generic. So we've attempted to remember our core principles. One is preservation, so we need to make sure that we've got enough information to make sure that we can preserve the objects and identify any issues with any of our objects. Sustainability, as I mentioned, again, bearing in mind the kind of staffing levels that we have now, we need to make sure that we're not overcommitting ourselves. And also sticking to strengths. So, as I mentioned, for us, Fedora is a management layer, and it's the source of truth for our digital objects. If you want to know the status of a particular digital object, Fedora will tell you. But we've tried to be careful to make sure that we let it do that, and we don't try and enforce extra bits on it. Like, we don't expect it to deal with access, we don't expect it to deal with descriptive metadata or sort of semantic structuring of data. We've got the LMS for that, we've got our FFF stack for that. So given those, we kind of split the work up into 4 main chunks. So the initial migration, an update, so this is the kind of model consolidation to kind of bring everything together and make it much more generic and much more consistent. Developing new ingest workflows, and then the new kind of access environment. So those 53 models, we've kind of managed to get down to 3. After doing the analysis and looking at the similarities and differences. We have 1, 2, and 3 levels, and the general rule is that your image binaries and technical binaries are attached to the lowest level. These are containers, kind of replacing the concept of objects on Fedora 3. And then our descriptive record, which is essentially, we'll be retrieving a mark XML file from our library management system and attaching that as a mark XML binary to the top level container. So to give you an example of what we're looking at, our 1 level would be kind of single or just a couple of page documents, so photographs and wills, things like that. 2 level would be more digitized books, manuscripts, or photographic collections. And then 3 level is our newspapers and journals, because you have the kind of title level, which is where the description lives. You have an issue level, which is needed for meaningful navigation of the object or objects, and then the page or file level. Sorry, I totally lost my mouse there. There we go. So to PCDM or not to PCDM. So we'd identified PCDM as a possible kind of data format to use quite early on. I think this was back in kind of 2015, 16, that kind of time. I felt like there was a general kind of steer in the community of, METS has had its time, we need to move away. And a lot of people were pointing out PCDM. So we'd looked into it, and it looked good. It looked like it was going to do most of what we wanted. We knew it was heavily used by the Samvera community, so we knew that it was well adopted and was likely to be stable and have support available. And I do at this point want to give a shout out to Esme Cowles, who, we pestered him with endless questions on how we would model our data in PCDM. We also had identified a tool that would automate manifest generation for us. I mean, it is automated at the moment, but it's basically run by an XSL that was written by somebody who isn't here. And now it's one of those kind of things where everybody sort of very gingerly goes in and looks at it and goes, I really don't want to touch that because I'm going to break it. And if it breaks, we don't even want to think about that. So the fact that that tool was there was great. The downside of that tool, as we got kind of further along this journey, is that it's presentation version 2. And I think, we are still on presentation 2 with IIIF, and we really need to think about moving to version 3. And then we kind of got to the point where, again, this kind of back and forth of trying to model our objects in PCDM, and the newspapers and journals were absolutely killing us. So to show you, this is an example document of what a manuscript would look like. So when you want to represent a structure in PCDM, you have to use these kind of proxy objects. And each proxy, if it's the first proxy in a sequence, it will say that it's first, and if it's last, it says last. And all the ones in between just point to the one before it and the one after it. So for, massive objects like newspapers and journals, this was getting quite painful, in all honesty. But, we kind of did it. And then we got further through the process, and, we're kind of seeing that we need to set a deadline, we need to make more progress. So, and we lost some of the staff expertise that we had when we originally were planning this out. So METS to the rescue, we decided in the end that we would stick with METS, not the massive documents that we had historically been using, but essentially just have it to run the structural map and to structure the objects for display, or rather structure the objects to tell the manifest generation how to structure the display. So we decided to do that instead. We have adopted some PCDM elements to keep in the RDF on the object, and we've also expanded our own namespace for some others. The idea being just to put sort of key pieces of metadata in the RDF on the object to make it a bit more easily searchable. Okay, so the migration itself. So we take a copy of our live data, because remember, we're still actually live ingesting. So we take a copy. We run various pre-migration tasks that we realized we needed to do. So we're updating the archival data streams. This is because when we migrated our digital archive many years back now, that you can't kind of directly get at the objects via resolvable URL anymore. So we built a service that essentially translates what was in the data streams into something that allows you to retrieve the archival file from the digital archive. So that needs to be run. We also wanted to get rid of a lot of data streams, like some objects had JP2s in Fedora and others didn't. We also had a lot of sort of images and stuff that we really didn't need anymore, derivatives, sorry, that we didn't need anymore. So we're getting rid of those. We're also running a little fix that was breaking the migration. So we run all that, and then we run the migration. And I just want to give a shout out to the guys who built the migration tooling, because it's given the complexity and variety in our data, it is crazy how it just works. The migration just works, and it's it's been a really positive step for us to be able to actually look at it and see that it's worked. The downside was the indexing. So the migration would complete, that's great, and then we'd run the DB index. And the first time we tried this on the kind of whole set back in September 24, the DB index ran for a month. Part of the reason for that is because 6 million Fedora 3 objects turn into 53 million OCFL objects. So we knew that wasn't really going to work for us. So we started again with smaller sample, lots of testing, lots of iterations. I think the main thing we eventually ended up doing was moving to SSD, and that was a significant speed increase. But yeah, we've optimized the process, and our most recent full migration, which was actually slightly larger, obviously, because of the ongoing ingest, we managed to complete that in about 3 days. The next bit was triple store indexing, and we're kind of still working on that. We eventually managed to get that done. We found it kept failing. It would start off great, and it would slow down and slow down and slow down and eventually stop. So we looked at everything we could possibly look at for optimization. We actually throttled the requests to try and keep it, so it would slow down, but not slow down to the point of stop. Us and others, we know other implementers have seen similar problems. There's a possible memory leak issue, which I know that the tech team have been looking at. We've got to the point where we've managed to get it to complete in 2 weeks, but it's kind of not critical for sort of go live of ongoing ingest and things like that. So we've kind of parked that for now. So where are we now? We're setting up our eventual production server, because a year ago we set up a production server, but now with trying to future-proof, we've just established a new server, which is now Rocky Linux 10, trying to make sure we can go as long as possible without needing to migrate again. We're working on phase 2, so now that the amazing migration tooling has done its job, we're working on essentially modifying the objects so that they fit the new models, the same as the new ingests will, having learned our lesson to not just leave differences in the repository and try and clean up. We are also now working on redeveloping ingest workflows for the stuff that we are actively ingesting. We're working on building the new access stack, and we're looking at hopefully switching to Fedora 6 for live ingest from January 2026. I know I'm quite tight on time, so very quickly, what's next? We know we have a lot to do post-migration. There's going to be a really long tail of cleanup tasks of data and trying to get things, if not necessarily so that they look identical, at least that we clearly documented what differences are and why they're there, because that's what we fall over every time. We need new IIIF manifest generation processes that are simpler and consistent across the whole of the repository, not just the particular data sets. We need to reestablish ingest for newspapers and journals, because we have over the many years been asked repeatedly to add more to those collections, and currently we can't because the workflows are broken. And we know that we need new workflows for AV material, as I mentioned, archival material, and also Born Digital. We're getting increasing amounts of Born Digital collections in, and we'd like those to be in Fedora as well. And at some point, Fedora 7. Very glad to hear that that's not a too onerous migration, but we might give it a bit before we attempt that, to be fair. Right, sorry, I've talked a lot more than I thought I would. I don't think I've left any time for questions, but thank you very much for listening. My email's on the slide. And yeah.
You do actually have time for questions. You've got 5 minutes. So unless you were hoping that you talked too long and didn't have to answer questions. I mean, that's always the other side of things.
Yeah, it wasn't deliberate. I really thought I was going to be short, but
No,
clearly
it's
not.
fantastic. Great in-depth description of I think a lot of people can relate to. There was some comments in the chat, 53 data models. Like I think a lot of
Yeah.
people can relate to a lot of what you experienced and are experiencing. So are there any questions for Sîan? Yeah, Doran.
Yeah, hi, Doran here from U.S. National Library of Medicine. Thank you for the presentation. We I think have very similar in terms of the versions of Fedora and the scale of the repository and the number of models and the migration story of going out to tens or hundreds of millions of OCFL objects as part of the migration. And also experienced, I think, quite long indexing, at least into the Fedora database. I assume is what you're referring to, months-long processes. If you could, I didn't quite catch what you said you guys did in order to speed up the process. Was it moving to solid state, or could you could you expand on how you were able to get that to a reasonable time, and also where, is this on-prem? Is cloud involved?
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, we're not cloud. I really should have put that in. We're not cloud. I know we're kind of outliers in that. But yeah, so it's all on-prem, virtual servers mainly. And yeah, I think it was mainly the SSD was the one that had the big impact. I'm not technical in any way, but I could definitely, if you're really interested, I could put you in touch with some of our technical team who can go into more depth on what we did.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, maybe we can touch base offline. We have a very similar problem and experience similar challenges. Thank you.
Other questions? No? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that work with us. And hopefully the rest of it, and ideally, right, the Fedora 7 migration isn't no migration required, right? That's the whole point. So
I think, in fairness, so far the bit that you guys have done has worked. The bit is the bit that we have to do.
It's my favorite line. It just worked. That was my favorite line. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Sîan and the team.